What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Mark Bealin of SearchLab. You can check him out at searchlabdigital.com. Mark, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of kind of the EO series / agency series, I had Anthony Standifor, How to Start a Beauty Brand from Scratch. That was a really good one. I had Kevin Hundle, Delegate, Elevate, Transform, Unlocking EOS. That was a good one. You're smiling because I know you know these guys. We had Giving to Your Best Relationships with Andrea Herrera, and also Leveraging Local Expertise for Worldwide Business Growth with Cameron Heffernan. And I want to give a shout out to Bo Patel. Bo Patel's a good friend, colleague, and I know you know Bo really well, Mark, and he said you must have Mark on. And I've thought about having you on for a number of years. I just never reached out. So thank you, Bo. He runs xtechenergy.com. They're an energy efficiency company specializing in LED lighting, EV charger installation, solar installation, and much, much more. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So, Mark, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run all over the place to make it happen. So the host and the company can develop amazing relationships and create amazing content and do just that and show up for the interview. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, and I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you definitely should. Mark has a podcast we'll talk about. And if you have questions, go to rise25.com to learn more, or email us support@rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Mark Bealin. He's the founder and CEO of SearchLab. SearchLab is a digital marketing agency focused on local SEO and PPC. He actually started it back in 2017 as a side gig, right? So yes. Picture full-time job, working nights and weekends in addition to all those hours, in addition to a growing young family, and it grew. And SearchLab's won numerous awards. They've been on the Inc. 5000 list 3 times. He's also active in a few boards, including EO Chicago, where one of his goals is to grow the Accelerator program. So, Mark, thanks for joining me.
I'm really happy to be on. Thank you for that kind introduction. So
we'll get to SearchLab and what you do, but EOA has a special place in your heart, and it relates to SearchLab. So talk about that on your journey.
Yeah. So I think what I would say is I was part of this group EO I started in 2019, and I really loved it. One of my favorite things I ever did was I volunteered to be an EO Accelerator coach. So to give people a sense of, I should back up and explain what the program is. So to be a member of EO, you have to have a business that has a revenue over $1 million. And so there's some businesses that's more than they have, or they have between, so what we did is we created a program for businesses with $250,000. You have to have some revenue, $250,000 of revenue up to $999,999 with a fierce desire to scale. Like that's really all we're looking for. I get questions, a lot of people like, is it for service-based businesses? Is it for manufacturers, products, businesses, whatever? It really doesn't matter as long as you have a fierce desire to grow. The whole program is designed to help people like double and triple their business, because it's not. So if you're just sort of in a lifestyle business or you want to incrementally grow, it wouldn't make sense. Like the whole program wouldn't make sense. So I started coaching. I have a background. I don't know if you even know this, but I have a background.
I do in football. I was a football coach
for
many years, actually. I was surprised when I saw that.
Yeah.
I think it was like, I don't know if it was 10 years, but it was a long time.
I think in total it was 10 years. Yeah. So 8 years at Ignatius and then 1 year at U of D. And then I was back last year a little bit. So
yeah, you did a talk actually, Mark, I did my research, but how you talked about in the championship, how you discovered if the running back was in a certain position, the quarterback, if they were running or passing. So you did your homework when you were coaching.
Yeah, so I always we would do a million tricks like that. Yeah, like I have stories galore. So I have this real passion for coaching. That's like what I love. And so this just was like putting two passions together. You have the entrepreneurs who I tell people all the time, I can have a conversation with an entrepreneur all the time. It ruins conversations with my friends and neighbors because I find entrepreneurs a lot more interesting than, everyone else. And I'm always like the first one who wants to leave the party. I'm super extroverted, but I used to be, I'll stay and talk to anybody now I'm like, let's get home. I want to be down talking to the, whatever, the friends. And so anyway, I loved it. And I watched these really gutsy early stage, growth stage professionals, languish and struggle, and then they'd get a little momentum going. And I've had two people who graduated into EO. And so that was like doing backflips. I was so happy, and I just got so much energy out of this program. And I then got approached to run it. So now I'm on the board, and it's my job is to grow the Accelerator program. And we've been able to triple the size of it. So it helps anytime. This is a good marketing lesson. It helps to start with a small number anytime you want to triple things, So
you have one people, now we have three.
Yeah, we had 7, and now we had 21 by the end of the year. So it was great. And I just get so much value out of working with this cohort. And the thing that you realize, at a certain point, my business is pretty established. There's a decent rainy day fund. There's the sort of normal business things that you have, operating expenses out a certain period of time, access to capital if we need it. These are people who are very much hanging on. They're doing all the jobs. They're trying to get, and I loved it. I love that phase of the business, just the grit that the people have. They screw up a lot of things, and you're pulling for them. And then to see some success stories out of it has been super, super rewarding for me. And I love being around entrepreneurs. And so if I can help people, for me, to make a short story long, I started I had partners in my first agency in 2009. It was a moonlighting gig, but it was technically I had a company as well. So. But I started in 2009. I didn't really cross the $1 million mark till 2018. So that's 9 years. And I just tell people, this is a lot of this is a story of suffering. Like, it's just, when you're below $1 million, it's just like you have no real employees. You're doing everything. You kind of have to, no processes or anything like that. I really could have shortened that considerably had I known about a program like EOA.
What would you have done at the time, knowing what you know now, back to that first one?
Well, here's the biggest thing. So they call it an accountability group for a reason. I would say my biggest flaw was that I loved the freedom, and I loved, not having a boss and all that stuff. What I didn't love was, what I wasn't thriving at was, I could say I was going to do something and then didn't do it. Nobody really caught me, right? Like, there's no boss. And so when you get into EOA, you get into an accountability group, and you say, the coach is going to encourage you to share what some challenge you have in your business. At the end of the meeting, he's going to make you make a commitment to the group that you're going to do in the next month. And that could be as wide as your imagination, right? It could be, read this book, or, hey, you've been talking about your director of ops for the last 3 meetings. You got to take an action here. Either put them on an improvement plan or fire them. There was one time where I told somebody they needed to start paying themselves because they were not paying themselves. You need to put yourself on payroll by the next month, have a paycheck. All of it is really rewarding, because what would have happened to me was I would have actually felt peer pressure to do the things that I said. And instead, there were things that I knew the right thing to do, and not a month went by, not a few weeks went by, like years would go by, where I would just, I'm a compulsive people pleaser. I would just I like a I had 8 years in a business with business partners. I had 3 good years, that means there were 5 not so good years. And so I knew what was going to happen. Like, I think they knew what was going to happen, but we liked each other, we're friends or whatever. And it just, there was no accountability. So
What were some of the lessons you learned at that agency that you then brought to SearchLab Digital? Because obviously you grew very quickly
yeah.
at SearchLab Digital.
Yeah, a few things. I learned a lot of really dumb lessons. I learned a lot of things not to do. Like, don't finance 101 things, learn lessons the hard way. Don't after you take money in, don't pull all of it out every month. Like have I learned a lot about just like hard lessons about finances, making sure that you had money stashed away.
What do you, I don't know, for an agency or for the EOA, what kind of reserves do you recommend someone have in, like, as far as months go?
For me, this is what I would recommend as a coach. I think I call it core capital. I think you should have 2 months of expenses saved and no debt. And if you have no debt and 2 months of expenses, you're in pretty good shape. And you probably should have access to a line of credit if you're able to. And particularly that applies to agencies like mine. I think it's more valuable advice. People who are in different kinds of businesses, that may not work. Like I see people who sell products. They need to juice their line of credit all the time. But for people who are in professional services agency, I think 2 months of expenses and no debt is a good rule of thumb. And I think at that point you can become more opportunistic.
You mentioned 2 mistakes, but I know you did a lot of things for growth. What helped move the needle from a growth standpoint with SearchLab?
So there's multiple stories here. I think there's like 3 phases. At the beginning stages, and this is what I did in my first agency, Evolving. So we just kind of continued the same blueprint. I started doing this in 2007. And so there was this thing that was happening where people were leaving print media and finding digital media. And it was such an easy sell, right? You would go spend a third of what you're spending with the freaking, Yellow Pages with me, and I'll give you a much better return. And we could really, in 2007, there were few enough people in here where you could really make that kind of a promise. Like it was working very well.
I knew someone, Mark, that they would take the Yellow Pages, they'd rip out the page of the person with the full page, direct mail the person,
totally,
and write the offer on there, right? So
that's pretty much. I mean, that's a more sophisticated playbook, but we were doing the same thing, right? So what we would do though, my hack was I would go to the person who was selling for the Yellow Pages, right? And I would say, look, you got relationships, but you don't got a product anymore. I've got a product. I could use a few more relationships. So we paid a lot of commission to print Yellow Pages in particular, but print media folks to convert them over. So that was really great. That worked really well. At the same time, I was doing an amazing amount of like just hustling. I would just go to networking things. I would, go to every cocktail hour I could. I tried to make friends. I tried to establish a reputation in Chicago mainly. And what that allowed me to do, I set up like a pretty sophisticated referral program with IT companies and web developers and design folks. And it was a lot of striking out. But then if you hit, it was all upside. So it was great. And it was kind of a fun way to grow too. I liked it. You got to talk to people a lot and learn from them. So I kind of got some free advice along the way while I was also growing my business, which was really cool and helpful. So those were kind of the first 2 things we did. And I kind of equate it to, if you ever see like a rocket go off and then they have to jettison the thing at a certain point, like just drops off. Well, at a certain point, we became a real company. We had employees and we had, rules and stuff like that, and core values and, purpose, cause, and passion for doing what we did. And these Yellow Page sales reps were not like, exactly, ideal fits. They weren't part of the company, right? They were not rubbing elbows with my team. We're in the trenches doing all this stuff. And at a certain point, what we realized is we bought this book of business, and that was it. It was over, So now we're still paying the commission, but my people kind of own the relationship. There's a cultural divide between the rank and file and those people. And so it really became, okay, it's time to pivot and become a real business. And at that point, we got scary. We went and really what I started to do was attend conferences, speak at conferences, and then hire people who were really good at conferences. And so once we did that, it went crazy. Like really, as soon as we hired Greg Gifford, and
I was going to say, Greg Gifford's everywhere.
Yeah. As soon as we hired Greg in the December 2019, it went crazy. And then we were growing really fast, and then boom, COVID hits. There were no conferences. So that stunk. But hired Greg, hired Mark, who was a PPC Heroes. We hired Mark in 2020. In 2019, he was number one on PPC Heroes list of the most influential people in PPC and Microsoft's North American Personality of the Year. So there's one more you could win. He said he was one shy of the Triple Crown or something like that. But he had appeared on, he died in May, but he had been on the PPC Hero list every year since 2015. So he was a rock star too. So I just got really lucky with 2 hires basically. And then the speaking started to take care of itself, and we've grown 8 times since the hiring of Greg, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about Mark, and we will touch on that. Yeah. But talk about recruiting for a second. Because you said, "Oh, we got lucky," but I'm just doubting that statement. What did you do to recruit over what both dynamic, really smart individuals over to SearchLab?
It's funny. There's this will be a plug for you at some point. So Greg truly was a stroke of luck. Greg's in one category, and then I'll tell you why it's a plug for you and for the other 2. In the middle of the night, I had my 3rd baby. So it was just one of those times where it was my turn to get up and feed the crying child. So I was doing that, and I was scrolling through Twitter, and Brittany Muller, who's a very well-known SEO, said, if anybody's looking for a local SEO, Greg Gifford's on the market. Here's his email address. And I was the right amount drowsy and the right amount courageous. And I just said, hey, we do local SEO. You want to talk? And I knew him, I knew how good he was and everything like that. So we talked, and it was sort of a ho-hum conversation. And then the only thing that was interesting was I was speaking at a conference called State of Search, and he was keynoting that same conference. So I said, when I'm in town, will you get lunch with me? And so we got a burger, and legitimately I don't know what his exact start date is, but it felt like from that point on, we've just been working together ever since. It was it just clicked immediately, where what he was really excited about, I was really excited about. He has this attention to detail and anal retentiveness, where I'm really whatever the opposite of attention to detail is, and laid backness that gelled well. So it just clicks really, really fast. Mark was interesting, and my director of SEO now, it was interesting. Both of them I met on my podcast. So
you had them on.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I had them on my podcast. So it was interesting. I had Mark on, and the day he got fired. So WordStream is this huge company in PPC. They got acquired by Gannett. It was a horrible acquisition. Then they ran into COVID, did a big layoff. And so I got an hour before I was supposed to talk to Mark. And this was one where I can tell you did a lot of research or whatever. I had done a ton of research on Mark because it was a big interview. He'd just come off this huge year. I loved how he blogged too. I thought he was really smart, and he had access to huge data sets. So he had interesting case studies. So about an hour before, Greg messaged me and said, heads up, Mark got laid off, and he may not show. So I was like, all right, well, that's fine. And it was 5 minutes past the time, and I was like, I guess he's not coming. And then he came on, and I thought he was hilariously funny, and it was the same kind of thing. We just gelled. And so I've had 2 leaders on my team who I met on my podcast, which is funny. And
I love
it. It's worked out well. So, I mean, it's another reason you think about podcasts for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
name of the game for me is get talented people. It's been a great.
We have a number of people, use it for, obviously building amazing relationships, but that can span with partnerships, clients, and hiring.
Totally.
In addition to professional, development. But I kind of joke around, but I'm not really joking, Mark, when I say like every great relationship for me tracks back to a podcast episode. And except for my wife, I did not meet her on a podcast, but like John, my business partner, through a podcast, some of my, my mentors through a podcast, indirectly or directly. So I'm with you. I love it.
Yeah.
You talked about, there's a couple of things you said I want to unpack. You talked about a referral program that worked really well. I'm curious now, do you still have a referral program in place, and how do you run it?
We do. It's less of an emphasis now. And so my opinion, especially in the early stages, was always, I don't care if I make any money from, sending you business, and I don't care, so I was always comfortable with the other person leading the dance, right? If they wanted 10% kickback, or if they wanted, some edible arrangement, I don't care. Like I was comfortable with them leading the dance, what they wanted. And for me, I was totally fine with, if you sent me business, I was going to make it my life's mission to send you something back, right? Like anything. It was an opportunity. So we diligently kept track of it. Just like you have like a HubSpot or a CRM for prospective new sales. We would have a visual where you could see my referral partners and who's been helping me out. Yeah. And if they were helping me out, it was like my life's mission to make sure that I got something back for them. And so it was really this virtuous cycle that worked really well. Ultimately, what we found was just like, there was a lot of work in terms of getting the right kinds of partners, right? So we would have people who, you have a lot of conversations without a lot of actually it happening. And we fell in love with conferences, and the rest is history. Like it was it became, focus is really important. And our focus went to, conferences and trade shows.
Relating to the conference, you have your own conference. And the other thing I want to talk about was niche, right? In the beginning, you're networking, you're probably talking to everyone. Talk about how you came to your niche. We haven't talked about your niche yet, but this relates to your conference. People can check out the conference. It's Ignition Automotive Conference.com. How did you eventually come to your niche of car dealerships?
We're almost like a niche within a niche, right? So it's really, really specific. So there's something called local SEO, which is different than traditional SEO. Basically, we look at this algorithm that anytime you have local intent in your search, Google uses this local algorithm. Boring. Anyway, we became really nerded out on that algorithm. And so we found that you said it so well. To back up, we would do web development for clients. We did social media marketing for clients. We would do design work for clients. I had a client, he's still my client, so I can tell the story, but he said, Mark, if I asked you to retile my roof, you'd say yes. we did everything. Right. So it was, I would say yes, and then figure out how to do it, afterwards. And
like, we have a tiling company, honey.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, no problem. Like, we can do it. Yes. And then we figured out how to do it later. And with some disaster, like, I'll tell you, that's all well and good with like certain things. But like one time we knocked out a client's emails, right? Because I didn't really know how to do it. I kind of thought I knew how to do it and I could figure it out. This is not something to play with. So there were some bad stories too. What we figured out eventually, I started to work with coaches, and coaches do a really good job of like kind of getting you, hey, let's figure out who are your most profitable clients, and kind of you can miss the forest from the trees sometimes. So you're having this really smart person who gave me some perspective, and we just kind of looked and he said, what are our favorite clients? Oh, they're all in local SEO. What are our most profitable clients? Oh, they're all in local SEO. I think we should just be local SEO. And then it gives you an expertise, right? You're not everything to everybody. You're an expert in something. And so you can now make case studies about your local SEO work. You can speak at conferences about your local SEO work. You're more interesting as a personal brand because you have this niche expertise. So we started to do that. That got me they got me starting to speak at conferences. And then I met Greg. The real way with automotive, Greg had already been in it, is the fact of the matter. And so once Greg got on board, we're still a totally, if you're a local SEO type client, doctor, lawyer, tradespeople, we'd love to work with you. But it just exploded. I mean, it went crazy with cardio, and he could tell you some things, like he was kind of unshackled from things this is really inside baseball stuff, but like there's something called like you're in the OEM programs where he was before. We are not, and so we can really do whatever we want. And it really
those are some of like the manufacturing companies.
Yeah. So if you're in their programs, there's certain rules you have to follow. You kind of have to take the client. You can't be like, I already have your competitor. I can't work with you. And so as soon as he got in there, automotive took off. And then we have just really talented salespeople who've been in there. It just starts to take on a life of its own. What I would say is the focus allowed us to go very fast. And it's very valuable. All it is for your clients. They don't want to, it's annoying to be like, there's a lingo to everything. So when they say, how's my fixed ops doing? You got to know what they're talking about. Or they say like, this is a buy here, pay here store. I got to know what they're talking about. And there's a whole, you got to know the models. You got to know what they're selling. You got to get used to, is this going to sell a bunch of trucks? Is this going to sell a bunch of sedans, whatever it is? And what differentiates the brands. And so we have this expertise. It's really valuable. You mentioned before, I didn't touch on this, but Greg's coming out with a study. We're partners with a company called Places Scout. I think it's going to be the largest local SEO study of its kind ever, where it's going to have like 19,000 dealerships involved, because Places Scout can do that kind of data set at work. And so we'll be able to tell car dealers, here's what the best, websites that are all ranking in the top 10 are doing. Are you doing that? And so it takes on a life of its own, Jeremy. It was like, one minute you're like, oh, I'm so happy we got some car dealer clients. The next, you're an expert if you do it. The other thing that we did that was really big, it was a really big deal, is we won a US Search Award for a car dealer. So in 2021, I think we won for Tom Cadillac Kia and best local SEO campaign. There's a bunch of awards that you can just like pay for. The one that you want in my business is US Search Awards. So it was a big deal when we got that.
It reminds me of a story, Mark. I had Dan Zawacki, the lobster man, who's a lobster guy, Dan. And he wanted one of these dealerships as a client, and he walked away with I think it was a Lexus, because he's like, I'll send these to all of your clients, or whatever he said, all of your best clients, and you just give me the brand new Lexus. So I think he did a deal there. That was interesting. But I love what you said about thinking through the most profitable clients. And not only did you niche in like a service with local SEO, but niching in an industry with the car dealerships. What made you decide to start your own conference? I know that's been a great channel and avenue from authority, expertise, and you and Greg have spoken at a lot of conferences. Right. So it's a big undertaking. Why start Ignition Automotive Conference?
Yeah. So you've mentioned some US folks. So I know Dan, Kevin Hundall is another one. So part of doing your EOS work is you come up with your purpose, cause, or passion. And so our purpose, cause, and passion is to cultivate long-term mutually beneficial relationships. So it's not to do well for car dealerships. It's not to do well with, but we want to cultivate long-term mutually beneficial relationships. So that's how we view things for our clients, our employees, our vendors, everything else. And so when you think about your purpose, cause, and passion, how can you use that? How do you actually use that as a tactic in your business? You say, is this viable? Like if I was could I go be a debt collector with cultivate long-term mutually beneficial relationships? I don't think so. But I could start a conference, because what that is these are all our friends. Like the people who are speaking here are buddies of ours. We vet them. We know them. They're definitely friends with Greg. the attendees are going to be mostly my clients and prospective clients. And we're either friends with them or hoping to become friends with them. And so if I look at it through a purpose, cause, and passion lens, this isn't such a dramatic shift. It would be to go, hey, you're a digital marketer. Now you're going to be an event coordinator. That's pretty wild. But what we care about most is long-term mutually beneficial relationships. We can serve people with this conference the same way we can with an agency, with that purpose, cause, and passion. And so we've been to a bunch. We one of the things that happens is you can see we put a bunch of things we hated about going to conferences.
And so if you're listening to the audio only, we're looking at the Ignition Automotive Conference, and you can see no vendors or booths.
Yep.
Our speakers were invited who didn't pay us to speak, and no pointless hype.
Yeah. So we really don't want it to be a pushy thing. We don't want it to be where anybody has to pay to get on the stage, which is fairly common, especially in automotive. And, we don't want it to be super promotional. Come here and actually learn something about what we do. And so it's a really push for education. And what I think was really great was we go to all these shows and we go, isn't it tacky how they have, you have to, the people run after you with a business card. Isn't it tacky how this presenter is always, isn't it lame how you have to pay to be at this show or whatever? And so we said, the working title for this when we were trying to come up with a name was the Unconference. It was the opposite of what everything else was, but that's a bridge too far. We still love conferences. So we want to keep what we love, but it's about doing everything different than the ones we really dislike.
Who's a fit to come to this conference?
So I think it is designed for automobile dealer, marketing managers, general managers, and dealer principals. But we have a huge contingent of just digital marketers who want to come and learn. So there's a group in Dallas called DFW SEM, which is a very vibrant network. So we usually will get a big contingent out of that. So if you're an up and coming digital marketer and you want a really cheap, inexpensive conference that's just full of information, it's not about trying to make a ton of money or anything like that, this is a really good place to start. And you'll have exposure probably to the speakers and to the guests that you wouldn't have at a larger event.
So I encourage, whenever you're listening to this, there'll probably will be a next conference. So you can check out ignitionautomotiveconference.com. I want to get people to get a sense, Mark, of what you do as a company. And I know you do a lot of things, but there's specifically, you did a rebrand for an auto dealership, which was acquired, which seems like a pretty complex project. And again, if you're listening to the audio, as you talk, I'm going to kind of poke around SearchLab Digital here.
Please do. Yeah. So they've been a long-term client of ours. They have 3 stores in Northeast Ohio, put it that way. And so they've been, we had great results for them. Things were going swimmingly. And then I got a call from the dealer principal. He said, listen, keep this quiet, but we're going to sell. We're about to sell. We're about to have somebody else. And I want you to be aware of it and start laying the groundwork before it happens, because I know in SEO that can be tough. And it's brutal. When you hear that, and you have a lot of success, you're like, oh man,
is it kind of like starting from scratch? It's
not like starting from scratch, but you typically you expect best case scenario, you're going to lose 10% of your traffic. And that's if we do well. If we screw up, and there's a decent chance you could screw up, then you could lose more than that. Or you could see, if you leave this to just your web developers, one of the things we really did for them was they're with a web developer that we recommend. And I like these guys a lot, but they're just not SEOs. And they were going to wipe out, tons of content that we wanted transferred over, or they were going to charge them an arm and a leg. And we said, no, it's just we understand the expertise of it. So save them some money as well. And that was the beginning of 2023. And rather than, and it was starting from a pretty high point, rather than that, going backwards, I've just checked with my team to make sure before I say this, but that the traffic to that website is up 86% since the conversion. So instead of going down even 10%, we've been able to manage it and really lift their organic traffic, their leads, and everything else. And we have, more importantly, I think, numbers are numbers, but we have expanded our relationship with that dealership group. So we have more of their stores. We have more service offerings for them, and they're spending more money with us, which is, when I talk about mutually beneficial long-term relationships, that's it, right? Like, we want to make more money, but we want to do it because we've done a good job for their clients.
Talk about the transition for a second, because and how you handle that transition with the new owner, because I have seen the opposite happen, where a company gets acquired and they bring in all their people and then fire whoever agencies they're working with. So talk about managing that relationship, the new relationship with acquisition.
Yeah, that's we have the same situation, right? So like anybody else, when we hear our point of contact is leaving, that's like danger, Will Robinson. Like, red flags go up, a bunch of people get involved and everything like that. I think it's really hard if you only have a relationship with the one person, the point of contact. That point of contact leaves, you're in a lot of trouble. Like, you're hoping. Hope is not a good strategy. What can be really helpful is if you have worked your way up the food chain, you have 3-4 people in the organization, the odds of all of them leaving are slim. And if you can make all 3 or 4 of them say the same thing, SearchLab is awesome, your chances are much better. That doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but I think one of the things I challenge my team to do a lot is move up the food chain. So if we get a marketing manager, or sometimes a digital marketing manager in a dealership, that's great. We need to make sure that they're extremely happy and treat them like this is the Ritz-Carlton, right? But start to try and get to know the general manager, try to get to know the dealer principal, see if you can solve problems beyond just our little silo. And even if it doesn't make me money, if it solves a problem for the dealership, we're stickier. And so I think that has been one piece of advice I would give you. The other thing is to have the sort of mechanisms where you go, this is a problem, and we better not just leave it to, Stephanie and Patrick are on that account. They're great, but they need some help right now because this just got really, really tricky. And there's a reason I have a job and I need to be involved in these kinds of things. And so it's about running to that problem and recognizing that it is a challenge. So when we see that happen, it's like go
an all hands on deck situation.
Time to put your boots and hard hat on and let's get to work because this could be trouble.
Now, I know you help a lot of dealerships. There was a case where you helped a bank in the Northeast, and I know there's companies listening that, I may not be a dealership, but I know a lot of these principles and things that you did to help grow, whether it's the dealership or the bank, transcend to other businesses. So what were some of the things you did with the bank?
Yeah, so there was this was a huge one. I think we're going to win the U.S. Search War. I shouldn't be so presumptuous. If we don't win, I'm going to be mad though. In total for 2013, what's cool about this account is it was only online. And so the only way you can make a deposit was, online. So we ran paid search and paid social ads for it. And I'm trying to remember how much they spent. Basically, it was the ROAS went from $27 to $338. We tracked $89 million of deposits into this account from a bank, from my agency, just doing directly from our work. So not just, hey, you got a qualified lead or you got a contact form, straight money, $89 million bucks. And maybe $100,000 of ad spend or something, maybe a couple $100,000 of ad spend. So it's pretty cool.
They're loving you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we had a
now you have a new niche, banks.
I know. So I let's see how it goes. So we loved, it's so fun. Been doing this since 2007. When you have a story like that, and then we're on a Zoom, kind of like I am now, and there's like 10 people from the bank. I can't remember everybody's name. And I'm like, this is a huge deal. And I'm just there like a chief high five officer and somebody else is presenting this data. And I'm just going, this doesn't get old. Like it's really fun when you have those moments where you're just really proud of your team and the accomplishments of what we've done.
I love that. What were some of are there any, I don't know, tactical things that you can share for people out there who are looking to, it sounds like there's a lot of paid related stuff with it. I don't know if you see some big mistakes on what people do when they're running, paid traffic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
Where do I start?
Yeah, today I don't like what I'm saying. This is going to make it sound like I'm being mean to Google, who is my, I have a business because of this company, but today what they're doing is why you would hire somebody like me a lot is to make sure that Google doesn't just spend all your money. And so what we see ourselves as being good stewards of people's, marketing dollars. And if you don't have somebody who's watching out for this stuff, Google will spend your money, and they will spend your money on nonsense keywords that are never going to give you business, and they'll do it. And if you have a problem, they won't be very helpful. There's not a customer service who's going to. And so one of the things I think in 2024, as we're filming this, one of our most important jobs is to make sure that we're not sending good money after bad. And it's a strange thing to be so focused on, but I really feel like I'm, consumer advocate for my clients. Like, do not show their ad and charge them $20 for somebody who's looking for a job, at a car dealership, or somebody who's looking for, what was the car in this movie? I don't need that. I want to get customers. And so I would say Google, left to their own devices, will the biggest thing they do is if you're searching for your brand. So if you had ads for Rise 25, you're probably going to get that click, whether you pay for it or not. So maybe don't pay for it, or maybe pay a little bit for it, but not a lot. They will charge you every time if they can. They'll charge you for keywords. So a lot of it is about going through. There used to be these match types that they really meant something. If I say this exact term, I mean, don't deviate this exact term. Now it's that term or close variants. And so they've given themselves license to spend your money. And that's what I really would say is, psychologically, I think of it as, how do we protect our clients' money and just be good stewards of that money as best we can. Don't let Google run wild with their budget.
Yeah. So maybe not having the correct targeting or the correct keyword, real specific keywords, and people are making mistakes. Go ahead.
Making negatives. So what will happen? Legitimately, people will have a search term. They'll say, hey, I want auto mechanic. Like, so there's auto mechanics in every single one of these things. Auto mechanic is the search term. But if somebody looks for auto mechanic school, we don't want our ad showing. So you need to make that a negative, or you need to do something to modify the keyword so it's not showing up, because people will click on it. Every time they click on it, it costs you money, and you're not an auto mechanic school. You're just you're a car dealer. So making sure that you're looking through for negatives is really important as well.
I want to talk, Mark, about mentors and some of your mentors throughout the years that have been influential, because obviously we talked about EOA, Entrepreneur Organization, the Accelerator program. It's a great place to get mentorship to get to the next level, and it's accountability and mentorship. It's based off of, if you want to check out Vern Harnish's book, Scaling Up. I did an episode with Vern Harnish. That's a good episode to check out too, but the book Scaling Up. And then obviously being a part of Entrepreneur Organization, mentorship is important to you. Who are some of the mentors for you that have been influential?
Yeah, I had some. I mean, in my first company, I got pretty lucky. And so Local Launch was this company that got acquired by Dexter Made the Yellow Pages. And our CEO was a guy named Justin Sanger, and the director of search was a guy by the name of Brad Geddes. So Brad Geddes is still among the most famous people in PPC. So I got really good training in how to do this very quickly from Brad and his disciples at Local Launch. And so I knew how to do this well early. Justin was one of the great, like you'd get in a room, he'd have everybody in the company and he'd give a speech about what we were doing. He just would present a vision for what we were doing that would get you really excited. I mean, you'd run to your desk and start doing things. So I really began to learn from Justin the power of a leader telling everybody where we're going. And so that was really helpful. As I developed in my career, there's a guy named Andy Crestodina who owns Orbit Media, who's
I had Andy on. Yeah. He's great.
And so Andy's just so generous to me, and not just to me, to everybody else. My favorite story about Andy, a guy named Chris Madden was quoting Andy. So this is like a fourth person or something like that. But he said, going around Orbit Media, he'd be like, yeah, everybody here is just so nice. Like everyone's so nice. And Andy stopped and said, yeah, well, it's good business. And it's true. People like to, they don't like to be around jerks. And so it's good business. I was like, yeah, that is true. It's not just like, you don't have to be a tyrant. You can be, it's good business to be kind to people and to, ask them how they're doing and to actually give a crap about your employees. So I really learned a lot from Andy, but that was one of the main things was like, you don't have to be the picture of that CEO pounding their table in a movie or something like that it was never going to be me. And so it gave me a little bit of a confidence that this is a company I really do admire. And then I really would say two people, Taylor Small and George Lawton, own a company called Digital Third Coast. When I first started SearchLab, so I worked with them at Local Launch a million years ago. And when I started SearchLab, I asked them to have, drinks and dinner and stuff like that. And we went out and hit it off. And they were just like dying to help me when really we're friendly competitors still to this day. But I owe them a lot because they were the first people to say, hey, you should join EO. And I didn't even know what it was. And really, after it got explained to me, I definitely didn't know what I was signing up for. I could tell. And it was just kind of like, you need friends sometimes to just go like, just trust me, just do it. And you're gonna love it. You're gonna take, you take to it like a duck to water. Just go do it. And I did it, and I've like drank the Kool-Aid hard, and I loved every bit of it. But I owe those guys a lot for, number one, you can have competitors that you don't have to be like at each other's throat all the time, And really, it's been a great relationship. I mean, we still to this day, I don't think we've ever had an argument or a bad word for each other. It's all helpful. It's all supportive. When they do well, I'm really happy for them. And we don't compete, like they're not really an automotive. We don't compete on like a little bit of stuff now, but they didn't have to do that. Yeah, it could have been like, hell with you. You're coming for my market share or whatever. Like they were really cool. And it made a really big impact on me too.
What I have found with quote unquote competitors is when I've dug deeper, we're actually not competitors. Like, there's certain services that we do different, or there's certain niches that we really focus in on. It sounds like the same. It's like, okay, you're going off and doing more car dealerships, and they're maybe going off and doing something else. So at first glance, I found it seems like a competitor, but maybe not as much when we've dug below the surface.
That's so true. Yeah. So I love those guys. It's been really fun. Like I feel badly for people who are in agency life post-COVID, because there was this period of time, it was very social, right? Like you would go to work, and then my office, we've talked about my office in Ravenswood. It was, to the north of me was Dovetail Brewery. To the south of me was Beguile Brewery. And if you walked into one of those after work hours, you were going to run into somebody who owned an agency. And it was just an awesome time to be like, so there were social things that would go on. And I loved that period of time because we just had so much. I feel like I learned how to be kind of a T-shaped marketer in that year, where I knew a lot about SEO, but then I learned a little bit about content marketing, a little bit about web development, a little bit about copywriting, a little bit about, digital PR and all this other stuff. So it was really a fun time to be coming up. Now you have to be much more intentional about making those relationships. It just happened organically back in the day.
So Mark, I have I'm not gonna say last question, but last series of questions. And I really want to you talk about purpose, cause, passion, and around about Mark uh, Irvine and honoring his legacy and talk about Mark for a second.
Yeah. So Mark's, you know, his professional accolades are unbelievable. So he's 35 when he died. He turned 35 in March 2024. And so and most of this stuff happened before his 30th birthday, which is crazy. And you know, he was he was just a rock star of a personality. And he was hilariously funny. So we had so much fun working together. We worked really long hours and laughed a lot. Um, he had this really goofball relationship with our VP of sales, Don Ramsey, and they would just make fun of each other all the time. It was really funny. And we had a great time. In his time as our director of PPC or vice president search, our PPC division grew 610%. So he was a absolutely sensational, like made my life a lot better. So when he died, it was devastating. And, I still have a hard time talking about it, but we talked to the team. And one of the things I've really focused on is how do I give him a legacy moving forward? So there's a few things we're doing so far. The first is Mark started a program at our company for a core values award winner. So each quarter, a member of the team it's an employee-led effort. So you have to be nominated by another teammate. Somebody who really exemplified the core values of the company would win an award and be acknowledged on our state of the company address. And so Mark led that whole effort, selected the winners, read through all the submissions, and it was everyone's favorite part of the state of the company address every time. And, just really good stuff for morale in the company. So what we decided to do is each person who wins that core values award will be able to go to Boston, where Mark is from, and we'll go and we'll have kind of a Mark Irvine day. Mark was he was a night owl. So we'll start the day at like 10 a.m. It won't be early. We like Dunkin' Donuts coffee. We'll do some service work. Mark was very interested in animals and in particular penguins. So we'll do some service work related around that. We'll have lunch at Chili's because he loved terrible food. And then
I don't mind Chili's. Actually,
yeah,
admittedly.
He's a huge fan. And then at night we'll get together with hopefully they'll agree to this, but we'd like to get together with his late husband or his husband and his mom and just tell stories about Mark. And so if you're a new employee to SearchLab, part of your onboarding is to learn about this honor. And of the 4 people who've won that core values award, each one will be nominated. It will be eligible to win the Irvine Award, which will be the highest honor in our company. So that will become a way to really stand out at SearchLab. If you're an Irvine Award winner, that really matters. Like we want that to be something you take with you. And we don't have any award like that right now. So this would be new, and it'd be a way to keep them going. The other thing that we did is, I'm such a big fan of EO, but Mark helped not just me, but many entrepreneurs really live our dreams. So when there was an opportunity to name a conference room, like what you could do is like donate some money and you could get the name of a conference room. So I said, I'll pay that if you name it Mark Irvine Conference Room. And there's some insignia that says, for a man who helped entrepreneurs live out their dreams, because he really did that for me and for other people as well. So, we're going to continue to do things for him. It was really important, at his celebration of life, I talked to his mom, and his mom was worried that no one would remember him, like he was gone. So it's like really important in my life that I make sure that she's not right after that he is remembered. So he did a lot for me, and we miss him a lot.
Mark, I want to be the first. Thanks for sharing that. I know it's difficult and it's pretty fresh, actually. But thank you for sharing that. And hopefully this piece helps him live on a little bit longer too. And that's what I love about this, is it helps leave a legacy beyond ourselves. So I just want to thank you for sharing your story, SearchLab. Everyone can check out searchlabdigital.com. to learn more. And Mark, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jeremy. This was great. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like 100 grand.